Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation, the great debate, but it can only be either of those, of course, if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls. The number to dial is 44-208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or I'll have to press swiftly on, because no one will understand either of us. I have been saying that for the last 5 years, but it's amazing how many people haven't heard me. SMS, you can SMS me on 4478-00008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk, and you can tweet me at comment_PressTV. And those details will have come up on the screen. But there's no need to bring up on the screen the subject that we're going to be discussing tonight, because it is the news story above all news stories. It is the news story that has resounded now over the last 2 to 3 weeks all around the world. The Palestinian people in Gaza, locked up behind the wire, with all the gates closed against them, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, have been subjected to a murderous and fantastically disproportionate onslaught from land, sea and air. Just in the last few minutes, Israeli tanks firing indiscriminately, because a tank can only fire indiscriminately. It has no targeting mechanism in its weapon of any kind. All it can do is raise and lower its gun barrel. Have bombed a hospital, the Wafa hospital inside Gaza. No reports yet of deaths and casualties, but deaths and casualties appear certain. In just the last hour, I think, maybe hour and a half, Israel has killed yet another 4 children in the last hour or hour and a half. I'm not talking about the 4 children on the beach in Gaza, though I intend to. I'm talking about the killing of children that has happened in the last hour or hour and a half. Now, there are certain moments. I've led a long political life, and I know when a matter or a moment of great significance occurs. I can see it, I can feel it, I can sense it, I can relate it to the life that I have led and the experience that I have had. I had such a moment in the Syria conflict when I saw the video of the man cutting out another man's heart and eating it. I told my closest associates there and then that this was a turning point, that nothing would ever be the same after this point, and that the high point of Takfiri support around the world had just been reached, and it would be all downhill from then on. And I was right about that. So listen to me when I tell you that the murder of those 4 children who were playing on the beach, an empty beach in Gaza, playing football, running around the sand, who disappeared in a puff of smoke, that's a similar turning point, for a number of reasons. Of course, if it wasn't filmed, it didn't happen. But unfortunately for Israel, it was filmed. And it was filmed not by Press TV or RT. It was filmed by the Wall Street Journal. It was filmed by the main American networks. And do you know why? Because the journalists from the mainstream, pro-Zionist, right-wing, capitalist networks in the United States had just been playing football with the 4 boys. They had repaired to a cafe not 50 yards away to have a cup of coffee, and the 4 boys they'd just been playing football with disappeared in a puff of smoke. They were eviscerated by Israeli fire. Indeed, one of the journalists, Peter Beaumont, tried to save one of the boys, and his colleagues filmed him trying to save one of the boys, giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. That's why the story of the 4 murdered football-playing boys on the beach in Gaza is a turning point, because now there's no hiding place. The US media is now reporting what we on Press TV have been reporting for months. It's now reporting what most of you watching me and I have known all along, that the settler state of Israel is a murder machine. It is murder incorporated. It was founded on violence. Violence against the local population it ceased to displace and drive out. Violence against the British administration and security forces that were supposedly trying to manage the competing nationalisms that were beginning to be played out in the state. Violence against the United Nations, which for a time Israel feared would not give it what it wanted, namely statehood. So when Count Bernadotte of Sweden, the UN Special Representative, was shot in the face and killed by Yitzhak Shamir, who went on to become the Prime Minister of Israel, that's the kind of violence that Israel was born out of. With increased technology, fantastic developments in weaponry, they have now developed a military superiority over a defenseless, practically defenseless, locked up civilian population in a big concentration camp. They can rain down death and destruction all day and all night, militarily. But politically, that's not so. In fact, this kind of horror that you're watching here has bankrupted Israel in the world. You see, in 1982, just before they invaded Lebanon and just before they carried out the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, Israel had quite a healthy bank balance of political capital in the world. But from Sabra and Shatila onwards, that bank balance has been running down. It is now utterly bankrupt. And the scenes you've just watched, and which have now been seen by the United States public, the story of this young boy in Jerusalem who had petrol poured down his throat and who was set on fire. These acts of barbaric savagery have bankrupted Israel's position in the world. Now, of course, people still move, to use Shakespeare's term, they still move for Israel, but no longer out of love, but out of interest. And interest can change. You see, the love that Israel once had, I think wrongly, but once had by the public opinion around the world, is now absolutely gone. Only those who are paid to do so, and only those who are themselves fanatic Zionists, any longer can defend the crimes that the rest of us have now been watching in Palestine, in Gaza, over these last weeks. So, if no one moves for Israel out of love, but only out of interest, the day must be coming when they will no longer move, because their calculus of their interest has changed. I want to make just a couple of other observations. The BBC has disgraced the country by its coverage of this crisis in Gaza. Other networks too, Sky a little better, and most of the American networks much worse. The difference is that the BBC is paid for by me, you, and the other license fee payers in Britain. They have a duty to us in the way that Rupert Murdoch does not. That's why I have declared that I will no longer pay a license fee to the BBC so that they can lie to the British people about Gaza, about Palestine, and many other things. They can take me to court, but they may have to take a lot of people to court. because since I declared that I was no longer paying my license fee to the BBC, a very large number of people have similarly declared. So the BBC are going to be very, very busy chasing all of us, hundreds of thousands of us, potentially maybe millions of us over the next period. So I just wanted to make one further observation before going to the telephones. And that is the performance of the British political class. David Cameron declared that he stood, and I'm quoting him, staunchly. For those of you who are not native English speakers, this means firmly, robustly, absolutely. He stood staunchly behind Israel. Nick Clegg, the Liberal Democrat leader, I'm not even going to waste any breath upon. But Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, has throughout this crisis not uttered a single word about it. He's the man who last year, very, very unwisely indeed, declared, "I am a Zionist." He was the first Labour leader so to declare. All the previous Labour leaders were Zionists, but none of them was prepared to stand up and say so. And the paradox is that I don't even believe that it's true. I believe that Ed Miliband lied that he was a Zionist. Now, it doesn't get much lower than being a Zionist, but lying that you are a Zionist because you think it will be in your interest is probably even lower. Ed Miliband is Jewish, so what? Many Jewish people are not Zionists, including his own mother and father, neither of whom would ever have said that they were Zionists. Indeed, they would have defined themselves as anti-Zionists. His father is now deceased. His mother is still alive and will be, I'm sure, on the demonstration at Downing Street on Saturday in London. So Ed Miliband chose the very worst of times to declare himself to be a Zionist. He must regret it now, not least because I'm pretty sure he isn't a Zionist. He's just someone who is prepared to lie for votes. But the biggest issue here is the darkness of the soul and the heart of Israel. An Israeli woman MP actually called in Parliament on camera that the mothers in Gaza had to be murdered before they gave birth to little snakes. This is the language of Hitlerism. This is the ideas of Hitlerism. Zionism has become the reflection, the mirror image of the very Hitler fascism which massacred millions of Jews. How's that for a paradox? How's that for a grotesque irony? Hitler described the Jews as subhuman. Israeli MPs described Palestinians as snakes, or as Begin once did, drugged cockroaches in a bottle. This descent into the language and mentality of fascism by Zionism is one of the most grotesque events that I have ever witnessed. I'm not saying this is the Holocaust that we're seeing in Gaza. Of course, it is not. The Holocaust murdered millions and industrially built factories in order to do it. Nothing compares with that. But the people who are bombing the refugees behind the wire in Gaza are definitely Nazis. They're definitely behaving exactly the way that Eichmann and Heydrich and the SS behaved when they delivered collective punishments to captive occupied populations. If the partisans killed a Nazi, the Nazis lined up the local people and murdered them because they could. This is fascism. This is Zionism. And lastly, before I go to Vancouver to take a call, this is not the Holocaust, but it is the Warsaw Ghetto. When the Jews, trapped in the Warsaw Ghetto by Hitler, Nazism, they decided that they would rather die on their feet than to live on their knees and wait for their occupier, their jailer, to murder them. They rightly wrote their name in the stars of world history. The Nazis called them terrorists. Everyone else called them heroes and freedom fighters. Gaza is the Warsaw Ghetto. The Palestinians in Gaza are the exact equivalent of the Jews who rose in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And the people who murder both are two sides of the same coin. Let me go to Shamim in Vancouver to ask Shamim what's behind Israel's disproportionate violence. Shamim, welcome.
Thank you, George. George, I have two requests to make to you.
Go ahead.
One of them is, George, that the Canadians would love to hear from you. In 2009, we were shocked that you were planning to make a trip and you were barred by one organization that only represents 1% of the Canadian population. We are extremely sorry that that happened, George. But this Saturday, July 19th, the people from Vancouver are again protesting at the Vancouver Art Gallery at 2 p.m. Vancouver time. And as Canadians would love to have a few minutes of your time and say to us what really is a conscious awakening statement that you've always been doing, George.
Well, I'll do everything that I can to help you. Get in touch with me through Twitter or Facebook, and I'll do what I can. Of course, we have a very full program on Saturday of our own activities in London, and I'm at the centre of those activities, and I expect London to be a truly mammoth demonstration at Downing Street, then marching to the Israeli embassy in Kensington. But I'll do anything that I can, Shamim. Anyway, go on to your second point.
My second question, George, is you have pointed out an alternate media, Sky News. We in Canada are now watching, most of us at least, have switched away from BBC, CNN, CBC. Could you list us alternate media other than Press TV, Sky News, and RT, which we are also watching? And that, I think, will also create awareness for alternate media that is at least putting the right picture, not just from Palestine and Gaza, but also from Iraq and Syria. Which
well, that's a very good point. A very good point, Shamim. I'm pressing on only because I have a lot of people on the line, but I just want to make the point that they have grossly underestimated the reach of alternate media, both alternate channels like Press TV, RT, and the Twitters and Facebooks and YouTubes and all the other means that people are now learning the truth. Our political masters have completely underestimated that. That's why our political leaders in Britain were staunchly behind Israel, whilst millions, maybe tens of millions of British people were themselves searching out the truth and seeing just how ugly was the face and heart of the settler state. Let's talk to Idris in the United Kingdom on this subject. Idris, welcome to the show.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just got to make 2 points here. A question that was asked earlier was, why now? Why is Israel doing the crimes they're committing now? Well, one of the answers for that, I think, is the weakness of the Muslim Ummah. I mean, we've got so many issues all over the Muslim world, and we obviously can't deal with another crisis. So Israel has picked the right time to punish the civilians of Gaza. I think that's one reason. Another reason is probably Hamas and Hamas forming a unity government with the Palestinian Authority. That's probably pushed them to their limits as well. As far as all the protests that have been going on lately, it shows that we're doing something at least. But obviously the blood of Palestinians' children is still flowing. And I think we need a bit more sort of guidelines from the leaders of these protesters that will have more effect on Israel and on the politicians to make a serious change, because obviously no changes is taking place at the moment. We are obviously humans, and when these pictures disappear from our screens and they call for a ceasefire from a dictator like Sisi, we're obviously going to forget a few months down the line. So we need something that stays on, that's rigorous, and that's going to make Israel and all these politicians change their mind at least, and make them think twice next time they attack civilian population, children on the beach.
Well, Israel will never change its mind. A leopard cannot change its spots, and Israel was founded out of violence and can only exist by the use of violence, because the Palestinian people exist, and they have been unable to be extirpated, unable to be erased. You see, the Zionist project depended on the Palestinian people giving up their land, giving up their Palestinian identity, and just becoming Arabs somewhere, wherever they ended up settling. But that has not happened, and it's certainly not going to happen now. And the only way that Israel can continue to exist is by occupying, suppressing, and murdering little children like this. So they're not going to change. But Idris, here's the point, and you touched upon it. Are the Muslims going to change? You see, you made the point there, staggering but true, that there's a very real danger that this ummah, so aroused, so passionate, so heartbroken, so angry with what we're watching here, that they will be in large numbers at Downing Street at 12 o'clock on Saturday. In a few weeks they might have forgotten about it. Well, what does that say about them if they have forgotten about it? We've got to, Idris, you and me and others, we've got to make sure that nobody ever forgets that boy and what happened to him. That nobody ever forgets those children playing on the beach. Now, when I say nobody, I of course mean the population of our country as a whole. But what chance have we got, Idris, of persuading Mary or Margaret or John or Jack if we can't persuade Muhammad, Ali or Fatima? What chance? If we cannot have as our base solidly 1.7 billion Muslims in the world, what chance of persuading other people to join us? In fact, it's worse than that, Idris. We actually have more support for Palestine in the West than we do in the East. There are more non-Muslims acting for Palestine in the West than there are Muslims acting for Palestine in the East. Where are all these demonstrations? They're in Cape Town, Vancouver, Toronto, Chicago, Mexico, Ecuador, London, Birmingham, Glasgow, Bradford. That's where the uprising is. Of course, British Muslims, Canadian Muslims, American Muslims are in those demonstrations. But where are the masses in the Muslim countries? Never mind, where are the leaders? Where are the masses? Where is this ummah? Asked that little Palestinian girl to me during the caste-led bombardment aftermath. Where is this ummah that they teach us about in school? That is the question, Idris. And we have to keep posing it. I'll tell you where the jihadists are. They're murdering other Muslims in Iraq, murdering other Muslims in Syria. They're so up for jihad, they're not even watching the Palestinians being massacred in Gaza. I've got to go for just 3 minutes. I'll be back, God willing, right after a short news bulletin. Please don't go away. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV. As always, the voice of the voiceless. It's the big conversation, it's the great debate, and tonight we are asking the question, what lies behind the fantastically disproportionate love of violence on the part of the state that they call Israel, the settler, colonial, apartheid state that they call Israel, they call the Jewish state, even though hundreds of thousands of religious Jews absolutely disavow them and are on our demonstrations with us, and tens, scores of thousands, maybe more, of secular Jews absolutely reject and disavow them also. We're talking about that, but the news is coming in thick and fast. Not only has the bombardment begun again in Gaza with truly horrific child killing. I mean, this is sadistic serial murder. This is sadistic child killing. 4 Palestinian children have been killed in the last 2 hours. 4 were killed, at least 4 were killed on the beach yesterday. I don't know how many others were. 80% of the Palestinians that have been killed in this Israeli operation are civilians, and most of them are women and children. More than 200 Palestinians have been killed, and well over 1,000 Palestinians have been maimed. Thousands of houses and buildings have been destroyed. None of these children was in Hamas. None of these women were firing rockets. It is collective mass murder, collective punishment of the kind made notorious by the Nazis in occupied Europe, not least against their captive Jewish population. And of course there's this bizarre story of the Malaysian airliner, bizarre upon bizarre. We have still not got any explanation as to what happened to the last Malaysian airliner. In fact, there hasn't even been a report that I have seen in months that they're even still looking for it. The Australian Prime Minister was at sea claiming we were about to fish it out off the coast of Australia 4 months ago. What happened to it? Where's the black box, indestructible recorder? And what's happened now to this Malaysian airliner? Another 300 people flying out of Amsterdam, from which my own wife and family come and regularly fly Amsterdam, Kuala Lumpur on Malaysian Airways. All these families now waiting for the dread news. What happened to that? I heard idiots on the BBC running away with themselves earlier today. It was the rebels in the east of Ukraine that done it, even though the airliner was 10 kilometers in the sky, 30,000 feet plus. How could a rebel have the kind of radar, laser-guided technology in eastern Ukraine to bring down an airliner? Only a state could have brought down this airliner if it was brought down by a missile. And there's only 2 states in the area. One of them is Russia, and the other one is Ukraine, the state that we are supporting as hard and as fast as we can. I'll tell you what I think is much more likely, though I have no more evidence than any of these other commentators who've already reached their conclusion. My suspicion is that both the first and the second Malaysian airliners were brought down by Al-Qaeda acts of terrorism. That's the Al-Qaeda that we're fighting in Iraq but supporting in Syria, that we're fighting in Mali but we supported in Afghanistan throughout the 1980s. Well, Amar is in London. Let's hear from him about Israel. Amar, welcome. Amar?
Yes.
You're on the air, brother.
Peace be upon you, brother. Good evening, everybody. Actually, where to start from with Israel? I would start from the idea which many Israelis come up with, such as, we are only defending ourselves. Now, if the Israelis, common sense, they're eating the Palestinians right every day. They're eating the Palestinians right and land and lives and oppression every single day, continuously. Now, once the Palestinians try to defend themselves or try to live and survive, they have to fight for their rights. Now, that's when the Israelis say, okay, well, they're attacking us, so let's bombard them on a big time. So let's just do everything we want, as long as they just fired us 1 or 2 missiles, which is nothing in comparison to what Israel is using, such weapon and such as their area in Gaza. Now, this is the first thing. Secondly, Israel is taking advantage of the Middle East and West. And unfortunately, most of the Arab leaders, the puppets and their sheikhs are diverting the Muslim Ummah from the real enemy, such as Israel. They are finding the other enemy, which is the enemy of Israel. So what the Arabs are doing, basically, they are going targeting Iraq, targeting Syria, try to target Iran, try to target Lebanon, whom are the only countries who stood against Israel. They are targeting Hezbollah, they are targeting Syria, which is the only country stood against Israel amongst the Arabs. Now, to think about it, now ISIS and ISIL, when they fight in Syria, what they do is, once they get injured, they go and get healed in Israeli hospitals. The same people are fighting Hezbollah. Now, once we go after this, we say, Israel partnered with ISIS and ISIL. Okay? Saudi government is against any Saudi going out for a demonstration against Israel. Now, Barack Obama is supporting Israel by calling its crimes as self-defense. Now, to think about the new plan divert the attention, which I said, from Israel towards the Arabs, those from against Israel. When we see, how many the 3 settlers in Israel whom we're missing, what we see is more than 270 Palestinians have died in this crime. And
it's more than 200, and it's more than 1,000 wounded. Amar, I've got to press on. More than 200 dead, more than 1,000 wounded, 1 Israeli dead, and 5 wounded. That's the disproportionate violence that we're talking about here. Let's go to Zimbabwe and hear from Lucy. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Hi, George, how are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. The better for hearing from you. Go ahead.
Yes. I'd like to comment, where is the US and the UK when everything is happening there in Palestine? These people, the UK and the US, these are parasites. I know that they're not going to benefit. They know that they're going to benefit anything from Palestine. That's why they're not doing anything about this issue. Whenever they know that they're going to benefit, they will have to have responded by then. They should do something. Obama, he has to show something. These are people and children dying each and every minute. What do we have to wait? What do they want the world to do? We have watched everything. And this UK is biased. The BBC has seen all the stuff that the people are doing there. Why can't they just display everything? Just they have to say everything in black and white. I'm so bitter and I'm so angry. I am angry, especially with the UK and the US. Where is the United Nations security? Where is it? Are they being controlled by the UK and the US as if they are the only contributors to this union? Everyone, I think, is contributing to the UN. So some other nations, they have to be involved. They don't have to wait for the UK and the US. They are the ones that are holding the remote.
Lucy, very powerfully put. Let me try to answer the central question you raised with an aphorism first used in the 1930s, but just as apposite today. It goes like this. Thank God you cannot bribe or twist the average British journalist. But when you see what unbribed he'll do, you know that there's no reason to. Andreas is in Cyprus. Andreas, what's behind Israel's violence?
Good evening, George.
Good evening. Nice to hear from you again. Go on.
George, I'm Christian Orthodox.
Yeah.
And I'm a Bible reader and everything. And you know, when God says that the Jews are His favorite, they're the chosen ones, you know what He said. Well, the first thing when I meet up with God, I'm going to ask Him what exactly He meant by this, what He means, what's so special about them. What happened to them in the Second World War was tragic, was very bad, was everything. But they're doing exactly the same thing now to the Palestinians, who cannot defend themselves. This is senseless murder, nothing else, nothing else. All the politicians in the world should be ashamed of themselves. All of them should be ashamed of themselves, because no one wants to do nothing about this. That's what I've got to say, George. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Let's go to Jamal, who's in the UK. Go ahead, Jamal.
George.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much. I would firstly like to say thank you very much for the work you're doing, and in particularly, you know, in the context of the Palestinians.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, you know, as British citizens, what can we do collectively other than the demonstrations that is planned?
Well, not much. We can't do as I did during Cast Lead and lead convoys to go and try to break the siege. We can't do that because the jihadists in Libya would murder us if we took a convoy through North Africa. In any case, when we reach the Egyptian border, the dictatorship of Sisi would stop us entering and stop us going to Rafah and into Gaza. We can't enter through Syria, through Europe, Turkey, Syria, because the jihadists, as they call themselves, would murder us on the way. I'm banned from just about every direction by the regimes on the way to Gaza. So what we can do is here. We've got to make these demonstrations big, and we've got to make them count. And the only way to make them count is to impose our will on the British politicians 9 months before a general election. See, the reason why Ed Miliband, falsely in my opinion, claimed to be a Zionist is because he thought there were more votes in saying he was a Zionist than there would have been if he'd said he was not. We have to change that calculus, Jamal. We have to hold to account every politician that refused to stand up in defense of the Palestinian people under this bombardment. We have to target every politician, like Michael Gove in Trafalgar Square. Look it up on YouTube, boasting how he was a Zionist, boasting how staunchly he stood behind Israel. We have to punish these people at the ballot box, democratically. We need to boycott everything to do with Israel and everything to do with everybody who is backing Israel. We need to demand sanctions. We have to make sure people don't invest, indeed they disinvest from supporting the Zionist settler state. Jamal, the main enemy is at home. We have to defeat them democratically, peacefully, and we can, if only we'll put our minds to it. Let's talk to Farida in London, always worth hearing. Farida, welcome to the show.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
The day the 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped, my heart sank. I knew collective punishment for the people in Gaza was on its way.
Even though it was in the West Bank and Gaza is a very long distance away.
I know.
And by definition, because they're locked up in Gaza, they couldn't possibly have been involved in the murder of these teenagers in the West Bank.
And how many times have we been here in the past, George?
Yeah.
honestly, I have come to the conclusion that the entire Muslim Ummah has no right to call itself Muslims anymore. I will disassociate myself from anyone, and it includes the so-called jihadists. If they do not understand the meaning of what true jihad is, the demonstrations that we're seeing all over the Middle East right now, it is the farthest cry from what the Muslim Ummah, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, had envisaged. And if we can take a leaf out of the Western demonstrations, as you have pointed out, we should all be hanging our heads in shame. Not a single Muslim leader has had the guts to come out and support the people in Gaza. And we call ourselves Muslims? No, we are not Muslims anymore. And
very powerful, Farida, and I expect nothing less from you. Actually, the leader in Iran has been absolutely crystal clear. Indeed, he made a point that I have been making. Maybe you read my Twitter feed. He said, we've been supporting the Palestinian people for more than 30 years. Are there any Shiites in Palestine? Think. Bakir in Copenhagen's on the line. Go ahead, Bakir.
First of all, I have some breaking news for you. It says here that Israeli army has started their ground operation in Gaza. So, terrible news coming out from Gaza. But George, then we look at Israel's history, and they have a very violent history of killing civilians, people. Then you see people like, you have politicians like this crazy woman, Khaled Meshaal, who comes out and makes such a scandalous statements about Palestinian mothers, and you have crazy leaders like Netanyahu and Avigdor Lieberman. That's what you get out of the crazy fanatics Zionists.
Yeah. That's what Zionism has become. Well, Bakir, you brought us news. All I can say to you is this, that the invading Israeli armed forces that have invaded Gaza on the ground, if the news you bring us is accurate, will pay a very high price. And they will discover that the Palestinian resistance will fight them every inch of the way. And if they think that they can reoccupy any square inch of Gaza, they're making a very, very serious mistake. So maybe it's a good thing that they have entered on the ground. Maybe we'll see a more even fight on the ground than could ever be possible when one side has locked the other side up and can drop bombs and rockets on them at will. Let's go to New Jersey in the United States. Talk to Bilal. Bilal in New Jersey, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. How are you tonight?
By the grace of God, I'm good. The world is in turmoil, but I'm good. Yes. I just had a new baby, by the grace of God, a baby boy 2 days ago. So I have reasons to be thankful to the Lord.
Well, before I start, I just started watching your show, and one thing I have to say, I have so much respect for you, sir, what you're doing, and I hope that all your hard work, it shows something. Now, the question regarding the Muslim Ummah not doing anything, they are not going to do anything, because as the ex-Mossad Victor Ostrowski wrote in his book, By Way of Deception, he says that the only thing they are scared of is the Muslim Ummah coming together. But he mentioned that it is not going to happen because we have done so much to keep them away. So that question is out of the history book that Muslim Ummah is going to get up and help. They are not.
Well, Bilal, please come back, and you're one of the 90% of the callers tonight who are new callers. Don't let me put you off by cutting you short, because I'm almost out of time. I just want to make this point to you that I don't buy this. The Muslims are not disunited because the Israelis have done anything to disunite them. Of course, the Zionists and those who hate the Muslims are constantly trying to divide the Muslims. But the Muslims could not be divided by such puny forces if they determined to be united. The disunity is a Muslim decision. The decision to hate another Muslim because of some small doctrinal difference is a decision made by Muslims. The decision to murder another Muslim because of that doctrinal difference is a Muslim decision. Don't blame the West. Don't blame the Zionists. What kind of West, what kind of Zionists would they be if they did not want the Muslims to be disunited? I'm afraid the decision rests with the Muslims. Paris is the last call, because there's only 2 minutes left. Jamshed on the line from Paris. Jamshed, welcome.
Yes, sir. George Galloway, you have my respect now.
Thank you.
And forever and permanent. Thank you for what are you doing. I am very, very sorry what is going on in Gaza, in Palestine. It is shock. It's shock since 70 years, but now it's getting more terrible. And what is surprising to me, I am Pakistani. What is surprising to me, Pakistan armed forces with air force and heavy artillery, they are bombarding Muslims in Pakistan, in northwest frontier, in exactly Fatah. This is very shocking to me, sir. What is going on? It is very shocking, sir. What we need to do? What we need to do, sir? We need your help. There is something wrong. Always critiquing our English elite in Pakistan. Oh, they are terrorists. Who is terrorist in Pakistan? Muslims? Pakistan was created by the name of Islam. Taliban, the Islamic students, they are fighting for their culture. And of course there is a group also called terrorist.
Jamshed, I need to stop you because I've only got seconds left. But I commend the heart with which you've spoken from Paris, and we'll return to that subject another night. The New York Times is reporting that the Israeli army has entered Gaza. The dogs of war have been unleashed. Let's see what happens now. My own experience of the Palestinian resistance is this: that every inch will be contested, and every Israeli soldier is now a target, and every Israeli soldier already knows it. Until I see you again, God willing, may you go.
Hello, just comment the name and the country on that number, and just make sure about your television volume set to 0. 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me to the phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment. Can I have your telephone number? Okay, so I'm going to call it.